This is flip video 5.2, MV equals PY and supply side economics. So we'll start with MV equals PY, and this is the quantity theory of money. So our quantity theory of money comes from our economic school of thought called monetarism, which is just the economic belief that monetary policy is more important than fiscal policy because it's going to emphasize the positive relationship between the price level and the money supply, meaning that whatever change occurs in the money supply is going to be the exact same change that happens to the price level, making it more important than fiscal policy, because fiscal policy doesn't necessarily lead to equal changes. So if we break down our quantity theory of money equation here, M is our money supply, V is the velocity of money, P is price level, and then Y is GDP. So if we look at PY together, this equals nominal GDP. So that's our MV equals PY equation. It just emphasizes that the change in the money supply equals the change in the price level. So some quick practice with our MV equals PY equation. Money supply is equal to 5 and velocity is equal to 2. So we have 5 times 2 equals PY. So nominal GDP will equal 10. And then same thing for the second practice problem. Nominal GDP is 100 and velocity is 5. So what is the money supply? So the money supply will equal 20. And that's how you would see our MV equals PY equation if you needed to fill them in. But what's most important from our MV equals PY equation, our quantity theory of money equation, is that it emphasizes that money is neutral. So any change that we have in the money supply will equal the same change to price level. So why is this true? Well, if we look at our money market and a recessionary gap, we're going to prove that this is true. So there's our money market at equilibrium, and then we're going to draw our recessionary gap at equilibrium as well. All right, so to close this recessionary gap, we need to increase the money supply. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the money supply to the right. I'm going to increase it. Here we go. There's my second interest rate. It's lowered, which will then encourage aggregate demand to increase. So there we have successfully closed our recessionary gap. And in that process of increasing the money supply, we've also increased the price level. So that change is going to be the same. So if we change the money supply by 10%, that means the price level is also going to change by 10%. But this also proves that money is neutral because in the long run, our interest rate is going to return to equilibrium. So one of our shifters of our demand of money curve is price level changes. So changes in the price level will change our demand of money curve. So when we increase the price level, we're going to increase our demand for money. So our demand of money curve is going to shift to the right, and it's going to bring us back to our original interest rate, bringing us back to equilibrium, which solidifies the money neutrality point that in the long run, interest rates will return to equilibrium. So when we have changes in the money supply, they're going to have the equal changes in the price level, which will force our interest rates to return to equilibrium, making any changes to money neutral. There's no lasting impact to changes in the money supply because everything returns to equilibrium. Now, supply side economics, weird like left turn into supply side economics, is also called Reaganomics. And this is based on economic policies of the former president, associated especially with the reduction of corporate and income taxes and the promotion of unrestricted free market activity, which is basically just changing production to correct an economic gap. So supply side economics is going to force short run aggregate supply, it's going to force production to close economic gaps. So our three shifters of supply side economics is corporate taxes, so the taxes that we place on our corporations, government regulations, so those are the rules, the restrictions that we force our businesses and that we force production to follow. And then subsidies, which is government assistance to our industries. So in a recessionary gap, our goal in that recessionary gap is, of course, to increase short-run aggregate supply to close the recessionary gap. So we want to decrease corporate taxes, which will then increase short-run aggregate supply. If we decrease regulations, that will increase production. And if we increase subsidies to industries, that will increase production. Our inflationary gap, we want to decrease short-run aggregate supply to close that gap. So we need to increase our corporate taxes, which will then decrease production. We need to increase government regulations, which will then decrease production. And we need to decrease subsidies, so we need to stop handing out assistance to industries, which will then decrease production. And that is supply side economics.